If you're worried about the integrity of this year's presidential election in the United States, that could be one more reason for concern about the election 2 months ago in Belarus. The official result was another term for Alexander Lukashenko, who's been president there for 26 years. But the results also being challenged by a long series of protests, mainly in the streets of Belarus, but also by immigrants from that country in places such as Boston. To tell us about their part in the protest movement are two members of Belarusians in Boston, Darya and Andrei Tsarou. Thank you very much for being with us. I want to start with Darya because a lot of these protest actions in Boston have been around the statue of someone who I grew up with as a heroic figure in Americans' War of Independence, Tadeusz Kościuszko. Tell me a little bit about him because he is a figure in Belarus too.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having us today, Chris. And yes, we grew up with the same impression that Tadeusz Kościuszko was a, very important figure in Belarus. He's originally from the lands that used to be a part of the union in between Poland and Lithuania, but currently those lands actually belong to Belarus. So that's why we critically study the history of his figure, and we also he is a national hero of Belarus. So that's why in Boston area, the monument of Kościuszko has become some sort of like a gathering place for Belarusian Bostonians who actually used to not be a real diaspora, but because of the recent events that are happening in Belarus, we just found out that there are so many people who want to, gather together and talk about what's happening in Belarus and spread information about the recent election and how it's impacting our country and how it's impacting the community in Boston area as well. So,
Andrei, it's normal for people from other countries to keep in touch with each other when they're in America, but aside from that, why was it important for you to take part in the protests here in Boston?
So for me personally, it's very important because despite the fact that I left Belarus and I live here for almost 8 years, I still have relatives back in Belarus, and I still am connected to them, and I'm pretty, worried about the situation there, and I'm afraid of, some repressions that can, touch them. And I think many of us over here are also, in the same position. We have friends, we have relatives, and they can also explain why it's important to him. But I think it's the commonality that we have.
Yeah,
Andrei, I want to ask you about that. What motivates you to take part in the protests?
Yeah, the biggest part of my family still lives there in Belarus, and I have direct family members who were affected by that. One of the relatives got severely beaten. He was just coming from a job home. He did not attend any protests, but that day the government special forces were capturing people like everywhere, just like complete strangers. Like they were in neighborhoods and just like pick up random people walking with dogs, like coming back from work. And then what happened next? It was just massacre. They were tortured, beaten, and it looks like there was an order to physically injure as much people as you can and demotivate them to participate in upcoming protests. So they make the lesson to all the opposition and protesters those first days after election. And recently also after one of the protests, one of my brothers got arrested and got some time in prison. So yeah, my family was directly affected. And even if you not have like one of your family members involved, when you normal person, like you see that somewhere innocent people suffer, there is no justice, and your government goes completely off rail, and you just trying to help as much as you can.
Andrei, as you mentioned, there's a lot of repression going on. I think practically all of the top leaders of the opposition to Lukashenko have either been been locked up or they've left the country. And yet, just on Sunday, there are 100,000 people out on the street again in the capital, Minsk. I mean, what keeps that going?
So it has something to do with like a recent event, right? Because historically protests happened before as well, right? But at the beginning of his presidency, he already crossed the border, right? So he had to kill some opposition leaders, and basically the rest of the oppositions back then they fled the country, right? So since then he was keeping like an eye on any person who can become leader and immediately like mitigate that attempt. So with time, people were hopeless, and those protests wasn't that massive because they didn't see any positive outcome of whatever they can do because government can suppress whoever. And again, government does not allow any financial, investment in protests, so they cut this, and without money you can't do anything either. So well, what happened now is, first of all, it's a new generation of young people who actually grew up and didn't see any other life. 26 years Lukashenko is in charge, so somebody born and didn't see any other president any other time. And so those people are taking their information not from government media but from internet, and they know more or less what's going on. Our borders are not closed, so people can travel and see how things look like in other countries. And then COVID came. So what happened during the COVID? The government who is like taking, uh, uh, who is affecting any single aspect of your life, they stepped away. So for you to understand, government decides like when school starts. School should start like at 9 o'clock, not 8, because president's son goes to school. They decide what's media you should read or what's president to love. So it's you feel it everywhere. And then when COVID came, government stepped back and say, you know what? There is no COVID. It's all conspiracy. It's all scam. So keep working, keep doing what you're doing, and you will see I'm right. And as everywhere, people started dying because they had no medical supplies, no treatments, nothing. So what people did, they organized and started helping each other. So since there were no leaders, people were just organizing in different towns, in different groups of interest, like geographical locations, and they were buying like supplies for hospitals, right? They were helping each other. They were supplying food for first responders. So, and after that, they started like feeling like there are a lot of us who can uh, do something. So when election time came, they actually were very serious about taking care about election as well. So they were supporting some of the candidates, and government was not ready. They were not ready totally, and the only way to mitigate that threat they found was to put them in jail. And as you know, the one of the candidates who we strongly believe won elections, she was completely random, like unexpected person there because she had to bring the paperwork right to election committee for her husband who was already in jail, and they said, oh, there is no signature, so he cannot attend. And then she said, then I will be. So, and then all the opposition consolidated around her, and also it united a lot of people. So maybe let me finish. I know I'm talking too much. So even though like protest is one thing, people keep also gathering like outside the protest time. Something unexplainable and unthinkable is going on comparing to like a year ago. Entire like neighborhoods, communities are gathering together, like making some performances, like the artists from forbidden theaters are coming there and giving some like performances there. Some musicians come in there and play music. So, and it unites people, and they, when you talk to them, and you feel like maybe it's not uh, how I think things look like they back in Belarus. They say no, it's not. It's never going to be the same like it used to be. We are united now. We feel we are the power, and we want to go to the end and get rid of Lukashenko.
Darya, I want to ask you about uh, how you feel when you see these people out in the streets in Minsk, and what it is they think they can get for change. Because I mean, there are some places where people are used to authoritarian rulers and they just put up with it, and here it's quite different. So what do people think is going to be better if there's change?
So when I look at the protests right now on some Telegram channels or somewhere in the Facebook, I feel that I want to be with my people. I want to support them in this willingness, you know, to fight for the freedom, because government does not understand that times, you know, they change, and for leader to be effective. He needs to either change along with the time, or he just needs to pass, his place to another candidate. And Alexander Lukashenko may have been a good leader at 90s, you know, but right now people feel that they want some new leader. They want somebody who can go ahead and, you know, support freedom of speech, human rights, feminists, you know, because the biggest thing that also majority of people were, you know, striked about is that he claimed that Belarusian constitution was not written for women. So he believes that women should sit at home, you know, and do some household things, and she should not be involved in the political, you know, political activity. And majority of women actually started to participate in those, you know, actions in Belarus, and they feel the power. They want to show, you know, the entire world that we are not only suitable for doing some political changes, we are progressive thinkers, you know. And this is a bright example of how three women became not like leaders, but most likely symbols of the Belarusian protest: Maria Kolesnikova, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and you know, some other activists. So we believe in this power, and we want to support them. We want to, you know, show international community that Belarusians deserve this change. And I believe that those protests should continue. With time is becoming more challenging because people get tired and they need some sort of, like, you know, support. And we want to thank European Union and the United States, who has already, you know, put some sanctions on some of the figures in Belarusian government. We thank you. We strongly believe that Belarusian people can themselves, decide what future they want to have. But at the same time, it's very important to feel that support, because
one of the women you mentioned who's leading this opposition movement is the Nobel Prize-winning journalist Svetlana Alexeyevich.
correct.
Alexeyevich, is she a hero to you?
I would say so. She's also more like a symbol, and she's one of the figures that, you know, it's not so easy to scare, or it's not so easy to, you know, frighten or put under the jail, because she's international figure, and she's somebody who we strongly proud of. So I would say yes, definitely.
Andrei, what would you like to see come out of this? Because right now, we're also looking at this and how other countries shape the events, whether it's the United States or Russia. What's constructive for them right now?
So maybe let me do like quick addition to what Darya said a minute ago. So we hope and we pretty certain things are gonna get better after Lukashenko goes away, because there used to be checks and balances like in any democracy, right? Written in constitution, and it was altered by Lukashenko in illegal, not legitimate way, and all the checks and balances were removed. So he is the only power, he is the only lawmaker, and there is nobody, there is no legit way to get rid of them other than elections, which are falsificated every time. So, first of all, we hope when he is out, then all the checks and balances will be restored. So there will be already ways to protect our country from uh, chain of event happened during his presidency. Second, the independent news media will be back in country, and third, I think Parliament will be finally representing people, and Parliament will be lawmaker, right? So, and there will be dialogue between people, and when it's dialogue, you're pretty confident things should be better. So comparing to other countries, other neighbors, we took different ways, right? After Soviet Union collapse. So what happened in Belarus? Then in Soviet Union, everything which was private, they made it like the it belonged to Commonwealth, right? So there was no private factories, no private plants, no uh, private farms. It all belonged to people. So after Soviet Union collapsed, it became private again. And some people who had access to to those goods, they suddenly became very rich people. And it was a very hard times back in 1990s, where around all those goods they were like gangs of mobsters. They were killing each other, fighting for a power, and somehow the situation settled. Right, there are really rich people in Russia and Ukraine who can affect what's going on there. And this is not a case to in Belarus. It still belongs to government mostly, right? And it's not, when it does not belong to you, it's not being managed properly, right? So that's my difference. So we all this protest really now represents not somebody's money, not somebody's like will or wish. It's really people just organizing. And if you look at what they demand just democratic elections, so we can talk, we can see who is good candidate, we can see his program, we can hear debates, different opinions, and then sure this person will become president.
Well, finally, Darya, we should mention that if people want to find out more about the movement here in Boston, I think you have some social media presence. So how can people find that?
So we have Facebook page Belarusian Boston, and people who are interested in recent event, they can go to that page. It's open for public, and they can find the scheduled events that are going to happen in Boston. And we also have decided to provide weekly meeting next to Kostyushka Monument, where all people who feel not indifferent, can come and support us. The most, the next action that is coming would be held on October 10. This time we would gather next to the State House around 2 p.m. And we invite all women actually to support Belarusian women. We want to do a march along the Greenway Park, and just bring flowers, dress up in white, and show support, and show you solidarity with Belarusian people. We truly believe that this can change situation back there.
Andrei, so what should people in America be doing right now?
Yeah, so generally the entire protest is uh, Belarusian people taking care about themselves, right? If you draw, you're helping yourself. But how you can help is stop helping Lukashenko, because uh, despite of all the sanctions, Lukashenko still uses help from America, from Europe. For example, they use Canadians' water cannons against protesters, even though Lukashenko government was under sanctions, so you couldn't sell. So they use Ford pickup trucks against protesters. They use like Czech flash grenades. They use American software to block access to internet. So if you just will follow what you agreed on, with what we in America agreed on, and in Europe stop supporting a regime, that would help a lot.
Well, thank you both very much for joining us. That was Darya Belavusava and Andrei Tsarou from Belarusians in Boston. We'll have more news in just a moment.